The Gartland Group presents Taxes, the IRS, and You with your host, Bernie Gartland. Taxes, the IRS, and You is a different kind of show that'll help you solve your tax problems. As former Deputy Attorney General of the state of Delaware and with over 25 years of experience as sole practitioner in both Delaware and California, the name Bernie Gartland has become synonymous with taxes. And now your host, Bernie Gartland.
Hey everybody, Bernie Gartland. Name of the program is Taxes, the IRS, and You. We come here every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And the production of this program is the Gartland Group. And you know, I have to share something with you. We're just not pretty faces here. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that are making this possible. And the crew from Awesome Dude Video is here. And you know what they always tell me? He says, just make it look like a conversation. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are going to have a conversation. And in that conversation, we're going to tell you what reality is, especially here in the Coachella Valley, because we're running into a lot of areas that are concerning you and should not concern you because you're not doing things correctly, and we want to help you do things correctly. So, Awesome Dude Video, we're going to just have a conversation. And so I want to introduce you our guests in studio to here. They're good friends of mine because we work together every single day. Kathy Satter, you are here, and you are the CEO of Griffin Bookkeeping. So why don't you say hello?
Hello, my name is Kathy.
And what is your background?
My background consists of over 40 years in finance and all various types of bookkeeping and accounting, and including payroll, bank reconciliations, profit and loss statements. I'm very experienced in QuickBooks, and I have a bachelor's degree in business management. And I just enjoy doing accounting because it's always putting all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Thank God you enjoy it because I sure don't. And by the way, all that you just said, including enjoying it, all that you said with your background is exactly why you're part of this group. Brian Bauer is here also, ladies and gentlemen, and he is the chief guy, the bottle washer, the CEO, anything you want him to be for American Tax Centers. He is the person that makes American Tax Centers work. So Brian, why don't you say hi to folks and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi folks. Before coming here to head up American Tax Centers, I was a tax auditor with the state of California for 20 years, and I'm also an enrolled agent. So we handle all the issues, the tax issues in that department. And
you handle basically corporate, personal, partnership, tax preparation, correct, as well as prior year's tax preparation,
audit representation.
And audit representation. And I have to say that's something to the folks out there. When you have somebody that was an auditor for 20 years, that is the person that knows how to represent you in an audit. And I have to say on a personal note, the success that you have had in audits has been phenomenal. And the other thing that happens is that we don't tell people what they want to hear. In other words, if you're doing an audit and it just doesn't work, right, you're going to sit there and say, this doesn't work.
Yeah, we're going to tell them what reality is. Right. If after we analyze everything and we go, hey, you know what, you really do owe this.
Right.
We're going to tell them that.
Right. And that brings us to that was a great segue. We didn't even plan it that way, but that's a great segue of why we have three entities underneath the Gartland Group. You ladies and gentlemen, have seen our logo out there all over the place. You've seen the not only this program, but the ads that we have on television. And we have the different logos. And the reason for what we call, and I used to hate this expression, but I've gotten used to it, and all of a sudden it makes sense to me, a one-stop shop. And what happens is that when I started doing tax preparation many, many, many years ago, I went through all the schooling, the master's degree program, I went through all kinds of schooling, and I found out that I really wasn't that good at tax preparation, and there was a reason I wasn't that good, because I didn't like it. But what happened was I started getting involved in IRS representation. More IRS representation, people coming in with levies and houses and being taken away and bank accounts and everything. So all of a sudden I found my niche, and that's what we have under Gartland Law. We do all the legal situations with people, but I needed somebody to do the tax preparation because I wasn't good at it. I understand it. If you bring me in your tax return, I will be able to look at it and say, I see some things here, but I always call Brian and say, Brian, what do I see here? What's wrong here? Because
Right.
he's the guru. So what happens is that we developed this. I knew Brian for, 8 some odd years as an auditor. I used to be against him across the table, and I found that he was so knowledgeable, so a person of integrity, that finally I approached him and said, when are you going to retire and come on board? Because we're going to develop this concept called American Tax Centers. And American Tax Centers does all the tax preparation, does the business consulting.
Right.
Let's not forget about that, but business consulting, and also the audit. And then as we're doing that, we're finding that more and more and more people are coming in and saying, yeah, I want to get my taxes done.
Right.
And in fact, one lady brought in 6 boxes full of receipts, invoices, and documents and everything. And we all would take that type of person and send them out to a bookkeeper. Okay. Now the problem with that is that my priorities were not the same as the outside bookkeeper priority. Example, if somebody has to do a tax return and I'm dealing with the IRS because they're a non-filer, and all of a sudden the revenue officers out of Palm Springs says, Mr. Gartland, I need that tax return in here by
This date.
This date, okay? And the thing that if you do not comply with the IRS directives, there are repercussions. So what would happen is that I would call up the bookkeeper and say, listen, I have to have all the bookkeeping done, whatever they do in bookkeeping world, which Kathy will explain to you in a little bit, to present to Brian, so Brian can do the tax returns. Well, Mr. Gartland, the client didn't pay me. Mr. Gartland, we have other clients, and, he's not high priority. And I'm sitting there going, well, what do I do? Now I got to call up the IRS and say, I can't get it done because my tax guy can't get it done because of the bookkeeper. What am I going to do? So what happens is I said, my mother used to use an expression, enough is enough and too much is too much, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's what I said. So I approached Kathy and I said, Kathy, here's the situation. We have all these people that have businesses that are not doing it correctly. They're coming in with boxes, receipts, they're coming in with, they haven't instituted a proper program or whatever. So we got together, Brian and I and you, and we got together and we decided to form a company called Griffin Bookkeeping.
Right.
And that is now the entity that are working with the people to get their books and records in order, to present to Brian to do the tax returns, so that I then can work with the IRS with what was done through the bookkeeping, through the tax returns and the IRS, and I work with the IRS and say, okay, here's the information on my client, here's what I propose, or in some cases, we do some bankruptcies with them, which because the Gartland Law has a bankruptcy department as well as a tax legal department. So the whole concept of making a one-stop shop, American Tax Centers, Gartland Law, Griffin Bookkeeping, works. And when we come back after some crash commercials, and we will talk about what they do exactly. We'll be right back. Are you suffering through sleepless nights because you haven't filed tax returns in several years? Hi, I'm Bernie Gartland for the Gartland Group. There is a solution. Let us bring your tax returns current and show you how you can pay the IRS on your terms, not theirs, and in some cases, without interest and penalties. For this or any other tax problem, the Gartland Group can help. Let us put control back in your life and have that control give you a future. No more sleepless nights. Facing bankruptcy has led many people to believe it was the end of the line, when in fact it was their doorway to a new beginning. Hi, I'm Bernie Gartland. For a full explanation of what a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is, call me today for a free consultation. Hey everybody, Bernie Gartland, welcome back. The program is called Taxes, the IRS, and You. It's presented by the Gartland Group, and we've explained in the first segment all about the Gartland Group, a one-stop shop. American Tax Centers to get your taxes done and audits, and business consulting. Griffin Bookkeeping to get all your bookkeeping needs. I laugh because I see what people walk into this office with: shopping bags, shoe boxes.
What they consider bookkeeping.
What they consider. throw it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And Gartland Law, which consists of lawyers representing you in front of the IRS in your behalf. And also we have a bankruptcy department. And at another time, we're going to talk about dischargeability of taxes in bankruptcy, because that is true, and we do it here. So right now, I want to turn the conversation over to Brian Bauer, who is the CEO and head honcho of American Tax Centers, and let him tell you a little bit about what he does on a day-to-day basis and how it affects you out there personally.
Well, Bernie, we get 3 types of clients that usually come in on a weekly basis. The first type is people who haven't filed their tax returns in multiple years. We see probably 5 to 10 of those a week. These are people that haven't filed in 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 years. Then we get people who are just regular tax preparers who need their current tax years done, and we do those all the time also. And then you get the third kind of people who are under audit, who have waited too long and now they owe a lot of money, and we'll get into those a little bit later, but we'll concentrate mostly on the first 2, the tax preparation clients. And like I said before, we get 5 to 10 of those a week, and what happens is they usually come in and they usually meet with you and me. Mm-hmm. We talk to them at the same time. The great thing about that is that if they retain us, they have attorney-client privilege. Mm-hmm. So anything they say in this room, it's covered. And the great thing about that also is these people that have the tax problems, they get a legal perspective that they won't get if they go to a CPA or another enrolled agent, because I'm an enrolled agent and I've had 20 years of experience as an auditor, but guess what? I can't practice law. Right. So they get that side of the equation. And what we normally do at that point is, in order to figure this out, we get what's called the blueprint, and you've talked about this on other programs, right. And it's the 3-step problem-solving process. And the first part of that is we have to find out what the IRS knows about these people. So we get what's called transcripts and IRP, mm-hmm. And that's the income information, what the IRS is looking for, what years of returns, if they've liened them or levied them, all the information that they have as far as revenue, because when we do these returns, and sometimes we're doing multiple years, these people don't have that much documentation. They can't remember, well, what did I make 3 years ago or 5 years ago?
Right.
And so when we do these returns, we have to make sure that we have at least that information on there. Once we get that information, then we start preparing the tax returns. Usually these people owe money. That's when the great part about this organization, Gartland Group, is that if they owe money, then they have a legal option, and then you come in and explain that and take them through that process to make sure that they get into compliance and get into a payment plan, or maybe a bankruptcy could be one of their solutions. But those are all legal remedies, and you go through that with them, and that's the great thing about coming here, because they may only have legal remedies after I get the tax returns prepared. And we get a lot of these people that come in that once their CPA or enrolled agent does their tax returns, they just say, well, you owe money, go ahead and call the IRS.
Right.
And we don't do that here.
And the interesting thing is that we have developed that 3-part problem-solving process, and
right.
I have to give accolades to Brian Flath, who is from KMIR Television, our account rep. And one day he sat down with us and he says, you know, we want to do certain advertising on television and everything. He says, and I had my format for many years, and he says, let's change the format out a little bit. And Brian and I sat down, and he said, what do you do? I said, well, that's an interesting question. And also, you know, it's funny in life. If somebody
right.
says, what do you do? You should say, well, I know what I do. Yeah, but what do you do? And all of a sudden, I realized that we break down these problems into the 3-part problem-solving process. And I discussed that with Brian Flath, and he says, why don't you tell the folks that?
Right.
And I'm sitting there going, that makes a lot of sense to me. If this is what we do, because we approach everything as a 3-part problem-solving process. And you're absolutely on point. The first part of the problem-solving process is to identify what the IRS and Franchise Tax Board knows about the client. Simultaneously, the client gets his own information to help support the information and verify the information we get from the IRS.
Right, because the IRS has all the income information, but
Right.
we don't have their deductions. The
Right.
client has to give us the deduction part of the equation.
But you know, it's just a simple, stupid little thing like this, for instance. The client says, well, I think I have some of my W-2s or whatever, but no, I don't know. And normally they say, well, you know, I've had a house, but I don't have any records of how much interest I paid.
Right.
Well, part of the information that we get, our blueprint, what we call the IRS, is that we get, it's a form called a 1098. So
Right.
we know exactly every single year what interest, mortgage, income deduction. The third part of the problem-solving process is once you do the tax returns, and your assistant Kimberly, who happens to be Kimberly Gartland, who
Right.
is second in command in your organization, she puts together a form that tells me what is owed or what is not owed, and I sit down with a client and I say, all right, this is what is owed or not owed. Now let's talk about your options. Now, folks, we're not going to go through the options today because at another segment we will talk about the options. So we're going to talk about the first two segments of the three-part problem-solving process. So now, when the client is working with you in that first part, and he said, and remember we said, we're going to send for and analyze all the information, dating all the way back to 2000 if we have to
Right.
find out what the IRS has done. Because if they have done a substitute return, there's another concept that we have to go into.
Right.
All right. So what we want to do is we want to find out if the Internal Revenue Service did this thing called a substitute for return, because when you prepare the tax returns, we then have to take that tax return that the IRS did a dummy or substitute
Right.
return and send it to a special section of the
It has,
IRS.
It has to be processed differently than just sending in an original return.
Exactly. And it goes to a place called audit reconsideration.
Right.
And what do we tell folks? If you do not have the accurate backup information for that tax return that we're going to send to audit reconsideration, don't bother sending it, because when audit reconsideration looks at it, they're going to say, okay, where are these receipts? Where are these receipts?
Right.
There are these receipts.
And I'll back up for every deduction.
And I
taken.
have to say, I think the general practitioners out there don't understand that. And they just send it up to Fresno and it doesn't get processed. What happens is that I see those clients later and they say, well, I sent their tax returns in, but they say I still owe the same amount of money.
Right.
Well, they're reading for that.
Yeah, they keep getting notices and they come here
Yeah.
to get help because their CPA enrolled agent didn't help them.
That's correct. And they send it up.
Yeah.
And they got the tax return and they say, oh, we got this before we did a substitute return, and they put it in the file. They
Yeah.
don't do an adjustment. So when we send for, when somebody comes in like that, when we send for the information from the IRS, we match up to the tax returns that their other people prepared
Right.
that didn't send it up correctly. So, folks, when we get back, we're going to talk to Kathy a little bit, and we're going to say, how does she support this whole concept called the Gartland Group, and what does she do to help Brian do what he does that helps me do what I do? So we'll be right back. Hi folks, I'm Bernie Gartland, and I'm so proud to introduce you to the Gartland Group. Do you have a need to have your current or prior year tax returns prepared? Is the IRS knocking at your door and you need legal representation? Do you need professional bookkeeping services? The Gartland Group can help. Let us put control back in your life and have that control give you a future.
Call today for a free consultation.
Hi, I'm Al Geiberger. As Mr. 59, I can teach you how to get out of trouble on the golf course. But when it comes to trouble with the IRS, I can't teach you a thing. That's why I went to someone I knew I could trust, Bernie Gartland and the Gartland Group. After seeing how they solved my IRS problems and handled my tax preparations, here's my tip from Mr. 59. Don't take your tax returns to anyone else.
Hey everybody, Bernie Gartland. Name of the program is Taxes, the IRS and You, presented by the Gartland Group. And as per our instructions from our production crew, Awesome Dude Video, we're just having a general conversation here. And they told me that it's going well. And we're going to have a general conversation with Kathy. Kathy, we're going to have a general conversation.
Okay, Bernie.
We already know who you are. We also know that we get a lot of people in here 5 to 8 to 10 people a week that have not filed in 3, 4, 5, 10 years.
Right.
And what we need to point out, too, is that what we're trying to do is get these people in compliance to get the taxing authorities off their back.
Right.
So we can make them a standard, I don't want to say normal tax preparer, I would say standard tax preparer each and every year,
And
because we're here to support them.
Right. And the first step to get them in compliance is that we have to get the returns done.
Exactly. And you can't get the tax returns done if the information they're bringing is in shopping bags and boxes. So,
Right.
Kathy, how do you support Brian in terms of working with especially small businesses? You know, I have to say that you may think differently, but oh my goodness, small businesses, for some reason they're very good at what they do, and usually
But they're trying to save money.
Yeah, the Yogi Berra approach. The things that they do well. The things they don't know what they're doing, they really don't do well.
No.
And so, what do you do to help the client and Brian get the information in an acceptable package so that he can prepare the tax returns?
Well, I have my assistant, Jill, who we get together and we sit down and we spread all the receipts out. And like we've said before, they've come in shoe boxes and they've come in file boxes. And we have to separate all the receipts so that we can put together what all the transactions are, what's allowable, what's not an allowable expense, and try and reconcile everything to the bank statements, because that's what the IRS or the state's going to look at. They want to see what's coming in, what's going out.
That's right.
And it's got to reconcile
Right.
to it, because I've seen where people have reported net profit of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you go back and you reconcile their bank statements to everything, and suddenly they really only had 1.8 million in sales, and their net profit was only 34,000.
Yeah.
But it was all on the bookkeeping that was.
And the IRS was looking at the 1.8.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And you recently have one. Obviously we don't mention names around here, but somebody all of a sudden the bookkeeper was not really doing things correctly, and the company ends up owing a large amount of receivables that they didn't know about because they weren't being billed correctly.
And they're a cash customer.
Right.
They take mostly credit cards or cash, and suddenly they had over $1 million in accounts receivable.
That they didn't know.
And nobody owed them. And I kind of like, this is not good, because it looks like you're trying to create a very profitable business, and it's not. You're a profitable business, but the financials are incorrect.
And by the way, that's one of the talking about audits, is that we not just prior year tax preparation, but a lot of times when people are being audited, you look at them and say, well, didn't you submit all these expenses? Didn't you submit this to the? I didn't get it done, or I didn't do this, and like that. That's where Kathy comes in, is that she puts together all that material once again in the proper form so that you can present it to the.
She's basically reconstructing their records and giving them a decent set of books. And I can tell you, as a former auditor, a lot of times people owe money just because their books are not up to snuff. They have no bookkeeping or a bad set of books, and you just it's horrible.
I want Kathy to also give the folks out there what I call a $200,000 piece of advice. Can you about making copies of the invoices?
Well, that's these receipts that we get from the various stores, whether it be Costco, Home Depot, any of them. The paper that's used is very, very thin, and it's heat sensitive. And over a period of a year or two, it'll fade. And I have a lot of receipts that we can't use because you cannot read them. You can't even read the date on them, let alone the amount.
And I had a case that's what I call my $200,000 input. Because when several years ago, this guy, we tried, the IRS even was working with us. The auditor was really, really super. He said, Bernie, I see all these pieces of paper, but there's nothing on them. I can't either unintelligible.
They're blank.
And he says $200,000 worth of expenses that could have been taken, and that is something that what the little tidbits that we give to all the people.
We tell all of our clients to make photocopies of the receipts.
You go down to the lighting company or Costco, whatever, for business purposes. Take the receipt, staple it, make a copy of it, staple it, and put it in your records.
Right.
Now, what can be done for these businesses or mom and pop organization that you can work with them to prevent this awful bookkeeping situation. What do you do? How do you help these people out?
I highly recommend using QuickBooks.
Okay.
It's a very user-friendly software application that most businesses, mom and pop, small businesses are using, and it's very, very effective as far as it's automatically creates the reports that we need. It's not something we have to sit down and line up. If I need to turn around and make something where I have to section it off, I can export it into an Excel file, sort it up, and do the subtotals for our clients to do maybe certain journal entries that need to be done.
So you make it easy for the client and easy for the tax preparer.
Right, and I really feel more comfortable when we have the bank reconciliations are reconciled through QuickBooks, because a lot of clients I say, oh yeah, my account's reconciled.
Right.
But they're using the paper statement and comparing, which is very time consuming, where the QuickBooks will automatically tell you where your variance is. Right.
There's another aspect here that we didn't touch, is that there is a very aggressive collection agency out of IRS agency. They are called revenue officers. And the revenue officers get bank statements. When they are working with a client, against the client, because they owe money, and we give information to the IRS because you have to, and then the IRS goes get the bank statements, and they say, hey, wait a minute, I got a deposit here of $330,000, and you only reported $50,000. That's where you come in also with the client. We put the IRS on hold, which they really work well with us on this. You say, we want to get the correct information, because the IRS mandate is to only do something that is correct in terms of the taxpayer does not have to pay any more taxes than what they owed. So they work with us. And you really go down and work with the client. Do you also go down and teach them how to use QuickBooks, and then you work with them on a monthly basis?
Yes. We can work with them on a monthly basis, review their QuickBooks, and see where they stand. Maybe they're making some posting errors, because there are some of them that they're just kind of like, I think I have it right, but I'm not right. And I'm working with a new company right now that wants me to come out and look at them and make sure that they've got everything set up right, because they were taking payments and they weren't putting them, they weren't crediting their accounts receivable, reducing it, and putting in the money into their deposits.
So we can help them in their business module.
Day to day, weekly,
There's also
monthly,
something
quarterly.
else that we do. We just got a little bit of time left, so I want to tell you. While we're working on your cases and something new comes up, we want you to call us, and we don't send you a bill. We do not send you a bill for a courtesy phone call, because a lot of times in the bookkeeping end, you got somebody in the business that does not know what to do, so they either hide it or they don't ask the owner because the owner says you don't know your job. Anyway, we are the Gartland Group. You can give us a call on the number that you're going to see, and we can take care of all your problems. We are a one-stop shop. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.